Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival. My name is Lee Randall, and I am over the moon to be here today with somebody I really love beyond measure. This is Ann Cleeves. I think most of you will know that in 2017 she was awarded the highest accolade in crime writing, the CWA Diamond Dagger, for her outstanding contribution to the art form. She gave the world Vera, Stanhope, and Jimmy Perez, characters who live both on the page and on our television screens. In 2016, she was a recipient of Iceland Noir's Honorary Award for Services to the Art of Crime Fiction, and that year was also when she celebrated 30 books in 30 years. Her novels have been translated into more than 20 languages, and they live on the bestseller list. Now, the world gave a collective sigh when Anne called time on her Shetland series, but I think we can all agree that with Wildfire, she wrapped things up most satisfactorily. One of the hallmarks of her writing is a vivid sense of place. Very few people convey landscape and its importance in shaping lives as well as Anne, and she herself has said people grow out of where they are born and live. So it's fitting that with this new series she's launching, Anne returns to a part of England she knows intimately, North Devon, where she spent part of her childhood. In this new book, The Long Call, we meet Matthew Venn, raised in a repressive religious community and now estranged from his parents. He's happily married to Jonathan and running his first big case, investigating the murder of a man whose body is found on an otherwise idyllic beach. Now, the case finds him adjusting to a new team, confronting authority figures from his past, and unpicking a web of conspiracy that asks us to consider who we protect and who we throw to the wolves and why. So let's just give it up again for Anne.
This is all a bit embarrassing.
No.
I should be talking to you.
No. Now, I asked you earlier about the title, The Long Call, and I think you have a reading for us that explains my...
Right.
Yeah, I did read the book, but I seem to have missed this little crucial element. So we will now find out why it's called The Long Call.
Yeah, you'll have to excuse me, because this is the first public reading. So if I stumble over the words a bit, it's because I've never read it out loud before. So... Matthew drove on. He'd left the window down, and now he could hear the surf on the beach, and the cry of a herring gull, the sound naturalist named the Long Call, the cry which always sounded to him like an inarticulate howl of pain. These were the noises of home. There was a bend in the road, and he could see the house, their house, white and low, and sheltered from the worst of the wind by a row of bent sycamores and hawthorns. A family home, though they had no family yet. It was something they talked about and then left in the air, perhaps because they were both too selfish. They got the place cheap because it was prone to flooding. They never have been able to afford it otherwise. If there was a high tide and a westerly gale, the protective bank would be breached and the water from the Tor would flood the marsh. Then they'd be surrounded like an island. But the view and the space made it worth the risk. He didn't stop and open the gate to the garden, but drove on until he saw Ross's car. Then he parked up and climbed the narrow line of dunes until he was looking down at the shore. Here the river was wide, and it was hard to tell where the Tor ended and the Atlantic began. Ahead of him, the other North Devon River, the Torridge, fed into the sea at Instow. Crow Point jutted into the water from his side of the estuary, fragile now, eaten away by weather and water, and only accessible on foot. The sun was low, turning the sea to gold, throwing long shadows, and he squinted to make out figures in the distance, tiny, lowery figures, almost lost in the vast space of sand, sea, and sky. He slid down the dune to the beach and walked towards them just below the tide line. He looked down at the victim, who lay on his back on the sand, and Matthew could see the stab wound in the chest, the blood-stained clothing. How did anyone think this was an accident? When the woman found him, he was lying face down, Ross said. The uniform turned him over. He rolled his eyes, but Matthew could understand how that might happen. From the back, it would look like an accident, and community officers wouldn't have had much experience of dealing with unexplained death. The man wore faded jeans, a short denim jacket over a black sweatshirt, boots that had seen better days, the tread gone, worn almost to a hole at the heel. his hair so covered in sand that it was hard to tell the colour. On his neck, a tattoo of a bird. Matthew was no expert, but the bird had long wings, a gannet perhaps, or an albatross, drawn in subtle shades of grey.
Lovely, thank you.
I can't seem to get birds out of the book somehow.
And there's a bird watcher in the book as well. One of the great pleasures, I think, of a new series as a reader is that I feel that you've studied this book with almost like treasure hunt clues to things we're going to find out as we become enmeshed in the characters and in their adventures. We're going to spend some time talking. I don't want to do spoilers, so we'll talk a lot about these new characters to let you meet them. And you can ask some questions a bit later on. Let's start with Matthew.
Yeah.
He fascinates me. He's another gentle man.
Yes.
Which I
a kind man.
Yeah.
I think kindness is a very underrated quality. I think kindness is a virtue that we don't celebrate enough because it's not loud and flashy, but it's so important. And I think kindness is also very sexy, which is why I think lots of people have fallen in love with Jimmy Perez, I think.
You do say in the book that you feel nervous introducing him, almost like somebody bringing a new boyfriend home to meet her parents.
Yeah, it is, because it's a long time since I introduced a new character, and it was the right time to do it. I knew that I wanted to do something different, but I didn't have any idea what I was going to do or where I was going to set it. And then my husband died about 18 months ago, and I just wanted to run away. I didn't want to be at home facing people's sympathy and kindness. So I went back and stayed with an old school friend who lives in Barnstaple, which is where I grew up. I grew up in North Devon, went to school there, the same school that Matthew Venn went to, Park School in Barnstaple. And we just spent a wonderful week or so just driving around bits of North Devon that had such wonderful memories for me, and talking about friends and about people we knew. And the West Country does have a number of these very small, quite rigid, not unkind, not cruel, religious communities. And one of the people that we knew had grown up in that. And so we were talking about that, and so Matthew really grew out of the place and about those conversations. And I was quite interested in somebody who, the only son of doting parents, brought up to believe that he was going to be a great preacher. He was going to be the young person who was going to take over the mantle of this religious community. And then how he would feel if he lost his faith and what that would do to you. And so I have him losing his faith when he's just about to go off to university and has a kind of breakdown. And he becomes a police officer so that he still has those certainties, those ideas of justice and probably of redemption that he grew up with. He can't believe anymore in their God, but he still believes absolutely in the values that he grew up with. And so it makes him sound quite dour and gloomy, and in a sense he is, but that's how he started. That's how he grew.
And he does he likes having rules to obey.
Yeah, he needs rules. I think he's someone who needs that structure.
Some of the other notes I made is he hates long meetings.
Yes.
Rarely raises.
Don't we all hate
rarely raises his voice.
I don't think there isn't a meeting that needs to be longer than an hour.
Right? He doesn't like actually to be in the office. He's always volunteering to go out in his car and do things. And he doesn't speak unless he has something to say.
Yeah, that's another virtue, isn't it?
I just wonder, he's also coming home because he had been working in Bristol, I believe.
Yeah.
And then it's a bit, you're coming home as well. I see, I don't know you that well, but I see lots of pieces of Anne and Matthew, and I'm just wondering, am I putting them there or are they there?
Yeah, I don't have that sort of background, but certainly that sense of trying to understand where you come from and what makes you, and I think that was quite fun. But, we make stuff up. That's what we do. And he's very much made up, I think, Matthew. But it was lovely to write him and to develop him. And the other reason why he is as he is and why that couple, you know, why he's married to Jonathan is, I said that my husband died. When my husband died, I was just scooped up by these wonderful friends, a gay couple, Martin and Paul, who really looked after me with such gentleness. And I was around them a lot, you know. The night after Tim died, I was at their house for dinner, and they were always there. And I think because I was around them a lot and they were in my head, they were the people that I was writing about. So it wasn't so much, Matthew isn't so much me. He's part of these very supportive people who were there for me when I needed them, I think. But it was a tough decision to decide, can I write from the perspective of a gay man? And then thinking, well, I write from the inside the head of straight men, and I write from the inside of the head of teenagers, so that shouldn't be a problem. But I really tried to do it well and had lots of people read it to make sure that I would have hated to get the tone wrong or to get other things wrong. But
well, to me, they're just a very ordinary couple, and gender is completely irrelevant to them.
I hope so.
What I love is Matthew is eternally astonished to be happily married. He's astonished to be in a relationship at all and happily married. Let's talk about, well, I don't want to talk about, you talk about Jonathan a little. I have much more vivid image of Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan is from North Devon too, grew up on a farming family. I left home when he was young to travel, had wanderlust, and was sort of just very relaxed, sitting on the beach drinking beer kind of guy, and then became involved in working with adults with a learning disability, ran a day centre, became passionate about setting up this community centre in Barnstaple. And in Barnstaple there is this wasteland on the river that's been there since I was a kid. It used to be a great big timber yard and a timber factory. But I think since I was last there, it's been empty, and the council keep having these plans for turning it into a new retail park. You know, half the shops on the high street are closing. Why do we need more shops? So Jonathan has this passion that he's going to turn it into a community arts centre, and his chaps, the adults with a learning disability, will be housed there as well, and it'll be a really nice meeting place for all sorts of different people. And and so I have turned this derelict land into my idea of a perfect community hub for all sorts of people, where there can be theatre, and it's almost like my ideal library, you know, because I love libraries. There'll be a community choir, there'll be a youth theatre, there'll be arts workers, and there will be this centre where people with a learning disability can also use. And so this is his passion, and he manages the wood yard, which is the community centre, and the body, the man that we've just met in the piece that I read, the victim is a volunteer at the community centre and also has a room in a house owned by one of the arts workers in the wood yard. So those are the links, and I do love writing interlinked different communities and how they come together, because the women and the victim live in this house in Ilfracombe. And anybody know Ilfracombe? It's a sort of faded seaside town which used to be very grand, and the paddle steamers used to go out from there to South Wales, and there are places, seaside towns. I live in Whitley Bay, it's quite like Whitley Bay. And because there are big houses, or there were big houses, they have become houses of multiple occupation, and because they're cheap, you have people, there are hostels for addicts and bail hostels and hostels for homeless people. And I love this sense of different communities, but it's also because it's cheap. Artists have moved in, and Damien Hirst has got this massive sculpture on the seafront at Ilfracombe, and I love this idea of just watching places develop and change, as well as I have this optimism that places can change and people can change.
I have this sense of you as a woman who will not be landlocked.
No.
You
Don't
must
like
be
being
near
in the
water.
middle. Yeah, don't like being in the middle. I grew up in Herefordshire, which is about as far from the sea as you can get, but then moved to Devon when I was 11, and suddenly the sun came out, and I was happy.
But also because when you were in Hereford and the headmaster's daughter in a tiny, tiny school, 30 people?
Yeah.
And your dad was running, it's not a brethren or a strict religious community, but it is a tiny, small...
Yeah, quite restricted, and people with quite restricted outlooks on life. And if you're the head teacher's daughter and there are 30 kids in the school, 15 infants and 15 juniors, and it was one room with a curtain down the middle, and it's quite hard. I can't remember ever being invited out to tea. And there was one woman who was always complaining that I was bullying her son, who was about twice as big as me. But yeah, it was hard.
Yeah. But I was reading this on a PDF and in a bit of a hurry, because this is a last-minute substitution, and I had Google Maps up on one half, and I was tracing everything. And in the
shall I show you?
there's
so
a beautiful
pleased.
map, because there are
I
advanced
do
copy
love
books
a map.
available.
Look at that.
Isn't it gorgeous? Right? And I was tracking things, but I utterly predict that we are all going on holiday to North Devon. It is, even though there's a murder, it is so appealing. And all the descriptions, your trademark descriptions of the area are so lovely. But this particular bit of North Devon's a bit cut off, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think people think of North Devon as cream teas and thatched cottages, and North Devon is a bit isolated from that. It's not easy to get to. It is definitely more upmarket than when I first lived there. You do get, I don't know, sixth formers celebrating exams from public schools with loud voices going on surfing holidays, and there are bits selling, upmarket wetsuits and surfboards and things. But it's still very much the heart of it is the place that I know, and I love that.
Can we talk about some of your other detectives, Matthew's team?
Yeah.
We've got Jen, a northern lass, very much his opposite.
Jen Rafferty, who's a Scouser, red hair, fiery, left an abusive relationship and got posted to the southwest so she wouldn't make a fuss. And teenage kids, on her own with teenage kids, not a brilliant mother, couldn't find childcare for them because they were a bit sweary and a bit loud, so ended up with a sixth former to look after them, and she did lust a bit after the sixth former, the lad that she got to look after them. So yes, part is hard. The teenagers now are old enough to leave and kind of keep her on the straight and narrow. So she was fun to write.
But Matthew says she's a damn good cop.
Yeah, she is, because she listens. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's what makes a good interviewer, what makes a good friend, and I think it's what makes a good police officer, is that ability not just to hear, but to listen to what people are saying and to pick up the things that they're not saying. And she's very good at that.
He's always sending her into tricky conversation.
Yeah.
And then there's Ross May.
Yeah.
One of those action men, very callow, very full of himself. But again, talking about treasure map clues, I think there's maybe more to Ross than he initially, in the initial first impression.
Yeah, he's a rugby player.
Well, that wasn't what I was thinking.
But he's a bit of a golden boy of the big boss, of Matthew Venn's boss. And that's not easy either, is it, to be sort of parachuted in, because his dad was a best mate of Joe Oldham, the superintendent, and so and he's sort of almost like a mole within the team and is expected to take tittle-tattle back to the big boss, and that's tough for him as well.
Yeah.
He has a bit of a trophy wife.
And he does both Matthew and Jen. He rubs them both up a little bit in very different ways, doesn't he?
I think, yes, because he's a bit of the trying to be but not quite managing to be the alpha male. That reminds Jen a bit of her ex-husband, and so she has to remind herself that he's not. And that she has to let him talk about rugby occasionally.
And another character who I really found myself drawn to is the victim.
Yes.
Starting with the fact that he has an albatross tattooed on his neck, and to me that is such a beautiful poetic touch, because the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, something I studied at university, and immediately that told me, okay, something's happening here, something's going on.
Yeah.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about your victim?
I suppose I wanted, with the victim, to help us see beyond the obvious. So it's very easy to make judgments when you first meet people. And so he's a bit down at heel. He's had mental health problems. He works as a volunteer in the woodyard because of that. And yet, when we get to know him, we find out that that's not all there is to him, that he's been in the armed services, that he ran a very successful business, and the albatross is guilt, and he's haunted by this guilt that he's needing somehow to find a way of getting rid of. And that was quite interesting to work my way into him as well. And I think he's quite interesting because he makes a friendship with a young woman with Down syndrome. And obviously we think that there's something suspicious about that he's been grooming her, that's maybe one of the motives. And then I want us to see beyond that as well. So, that's how that worked.
Well, let's talk about the community center a bit more, and about these young women. You thank somebody in your acknowledgements, a reader, who you say gave you the courage to write about.
Yes, I'd started writing the book, and again, it's a sort of association, mind games that your head plays when you start. So there's Matthew and Jonathan because of Martin and Paul, who I was around at the time, and then Sue, my friend in Devon, who I was staying with when I started writing it, had spent all her whole career working with adults with a learning disability and ended up managing the service in North Devon. And so I already had this idea for Lucy Braddock, this young woman with a learning disability who was being looked after by her dad, Morris, and his great concern. He was torn because he knew that he wouldn't be there forever. You know, he's in his late 70s. Eventually he's going to die, and what's going to happen to Lucy then? And the social workers are saying, you must let her be more independent, let her get a bus home by herself from the centre, think about where she's going. And he doesn't want to, he just wants to protect her, he just wants to look after her. So I already had that character drawn, and then I got this email from a reader, and I get quite a few emails from readers, and that's always lovely. And this one said something like, yeah, I like your books. And then she said, I've worked with adults with a learning disability all my career. I have a son with Down syndrome. Sometimes dreadful things happen to people like him, but nobody really listens because they don't have the words to say what's happened to them. Would you have the words to tell that story? So no pressure, but a bit of a challenge. So yeah, so that's how that character became stronger, I suppose. And I wanted to write about that. And in fact, not just to have a token person with a learning disability, but there are 3 friends, all of whom have all different learning disabilities.
Yeah, they're all very, very different.
Yeah. And then I went and chatted to this fabulous young woman, Izzy, who lives close to me, who has Down syndrome. And I suppose I wanted to know what she would be capable of and what might happen. And she can read and write. She can use a phone much more effectively than her mum. She's very IT savvy. She works. And so that was, and I was saying to Izzy, would you be able to keep a secret? Yeah, she really thought she would be able to. Would you be able to lie? And her mum jumped in. Oh, yeah, she'd be able to lie. I'm trying to watch what she eats, and she'll come back from the day centre and tell me that she's had a salad, and I can see the chocolate on her face. So that was reassuring. But she is so. The book is. I dedicate the book to 4 people: to Martin and Paul and Sue, but also to Izzy. And we sent her a proof copy, and she was so delighted to see her name in the book. It was lovely.
There's a really strong thread running throughout the book, though, about A, how we judge or shouldn't judge people, and then B, how we treat people who are different to us.
Yeah, I think so. And again, that comes back to kindness, isn't it? That sense that it's not hard to just put yourself in the place of other people. And that, you know, we've got that quite strict, repressive Christian community, but if you look at loving your neighbour as yourself, then actually that's what we should be thinking about, whether we have a faith or not. That's the important bit, and I think that's what I think Matthew does, and what Lucy Braddock does as well.
Well, this idea that generosity is not the same as piety.
Yes.
These two things are not always equivalent.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that I really was struck by, I'm always struck by, is that your books, the blood is not splattered up the walls, but the sense of evil and the dread is there nonetheless. It's much more subtly drawn, and in this book, it's very much. We suddenly realize that it's ingrained in the community, that there's something going on in the community that, although it might not be gory, is no less horrible.
Yeah, I think so. I think most writers write the book that they would want to read, and I'm not interested in reading or writing about monsters. I'm not fascinated, as some people are, and some people who write really good books, by serial killers. I'm interested in ordinary people who are just pushed to the limit. I don't research enough to be able to do too much about blood spatter, though I've got some very good friends a couple of whom are here, who are very helpful about that. But it is about community, I think. Yeah. Somebody once said that I wrote village noir, and I quite like that. It's about exploring different communities and how they hang together and what makes them fall apart. Mm-hmm. And I think that's at this particular time when we seem to be splintering off to extremes, it's finding that which holds us together that's quite important. Mm-hmm. And maybe my idea of the woodyard is a bit idealistic, because I would see that as a metaphor for how we should be living. That idea of all kinds of different people coming together, sharing experience, sharing lives.
And people are treated with dignity there, which I really enjoyed. I liked the way people were dealt with once they walked through the door.
Yeah, and I look forward to writing that again and exploring that in more detail, I think.
But when you're not setting your characters off on a massive high-speed chase or wiping down the walls from somebody's brain matter, what is the secret? How is it that you manage to keep us hooked and turning the pages? What is the secret to writing tension without
yeah. I mean, in a sense, having lots of bodies is quite lazy writing. Because, what's going to happen? Because I never plan, so I never know what's going to happen next. Maybe I'll just kill somebody off then, And there was a writer, died a while ago, called Robert Barnard. And more than one murder is a little vulgar, don't you think? I quite like that. And I do quite often kill off, but in this there is only one murder. And I suppose the suspense is because there is a kidnapping. We're worried about what's happened to the lass with Chrissy, the lass with the learning disability. And it's just, we want to know, we want there to be some sort of resolution at the end, and we're not quite sure how it's going to come about, I think.
I think your trick might be you get us so invested in the characters that even if they walk into a room, we want to know what they're seeing when they get there.
Well, that would be good, yeah. Reviewer said something like, I enjoy writing about people on the margins. And I think that is true. Not people who are in the centre of the action, but the people who are maybe a bit left behind and a bit left out, as well as the geographical margins of writing about places on the edge, or
literally
places,
on the edge.
Yeah, places that are a bit wild.
Well, given that you're famously not a big planner, but you know this is the start of a series, and without giving anything away, have you got a vision of where you're taking these characters?
Not really yet. I've just finished. I'm going to alternate with the Veras, because I think Vera I've still got things to say about her and about the northeast of England, which is where I live now. And I'm just thinking about a new Venn story. And this is really odd, because people say, well, how do you start? And I just have this idea of somebody blowing glass, so this idea of that you have something that you can blow but then is brittle. And I don't know where I'm going to go with that yet, but this is how I kind of work. So I have this image of a young woman who's a glass blower, because there are lots of arty communities in North Devon as well. And who knows, it might be something completely different, but you heard it here first.
That's fabulous. Now, you mentioned Vera. I gather she'll be back on our televisions next year?
She is, yeah.
I know you don't write the screenplays.
I don't.
Can you tell us anything about
And this series, because they've run out of books to adapt, this is all four episodes will be original stories. And I've not seen the script, so I can't tell you anything about that. But yeah, I did go up onto the set last week and had a great visit with them all. And it's going to look stunning, because they're up in rural Northumberland filming this. This is episode 3 that they're filming at the moment. And it's right out in the wilds up in Alwynton that they've been filming, so it's going to look beautiful. And they've taken over this tiny hamlet they had when they were filming. They finished there now. So it was hilarious, because there's just this one street and a pub, and it's just filled with TV people, and because there are 75 people work in the crew, besides the actors, and all the people in the village coming out and having a neb, and Brenda just being so kind. I was chatting to there's a couple of Bens there, I'll just go and say hello to them. Off she goes to say hello to them and have a chat. So that'll be on our screens sometime in the spring, I think.
And is it fair to say now, reading the book, when you describe Perez, nothing like Dougie Henschel, as lovely as he is, but is it not fair to say that now when you write Vera, you picture Brenda?
Yeah, I do. I think not so much see her, because even with the big coat and the waistcoat and the hat and all that, she's never going to be ugly, is she, Bren? I mean, she's incredibly elegant when she scrubs up beautifully. So my Vera is bigger and fiercer and has eczema. So I do see her different, but I do hear her words. When I'm writing dialogue, it's her voice that I hear, because she does those put down so well. I'll write a line and think, I hope the script writers keep this in, because Bren's going to love saying that.
Fabulous. I was re-swatting up on you, and I came across something where you said that you had a bit of a crush on Lord Peter Wimsey, and I would like you to, I'd love to explore this, because he's a bit posh. He's a bit of a,
Yeah, he is, but I suppose when I started writing, I was reading, and my writing comes from that golden age fiction, the Between the Wars fiction. And they were all posh, weren't they? It was only when I went on and started reading contemporary crime fiction, John Harvey, Ian Rankin was writing, and crime fiction, translated crime fiction like Henning Mankell, and then George Simenon, who is my absolute hero. I think the Maigret books are like a masterclass in writing crime fiction.
I will.
Maigret, who said, who again has that sympathy. My role is not to judge, but to understand, he says. And I think we carry that through contemporary crime fiction, don't we?
Yeah.
And he can say more in a sentence. He can do more in a sentence, Simenon, than anybody else I know. He can tell you about character, and he can move the plot on, and he can make you feel that you're in a place just by a list of items in a room.
And he doesn't write long books, does he?
Tiny
Master
books.
of Concision.
Yeah, really, really good.
Yeah. But you've evaded the Peter Wimsey crush.
Peter Wimsey. Yeah, but I think he is the love child of Dorothy Sayers, isn't he?
Yeah,
because Dorothy Sayers did have a love child in the time when it was really frowned on. She was a religious woman, and she had an illegitimate son that she ran away from work, had the child, handed it over to, I think, so a sort of informal adoption, and then came back and carried on her life, but was haunted by that. And I think, and was really, she had such bad taste in men. All the men that she chose were real rats. The father of the child had another family that he hadn't told her about, but he was fun, and he came and he rented a room in the same house as her, and helped her stain her floor, and took her out for jaunts in his car, and taught her to dance, and so she thought he was just amazing, and then ran back to his family when he found out that she was pregnant. And so you can see why she created Peter Wimsey, who is kind again, that sexy kindness, and respects strong women and respects educated, intelligent women. And I think Gaudy Night is a very bad crime novel, but it's a brilliant love story.
Yeah.
I think that carried me through.
So without having a crush, are you equally enamored of Harriet Vane?
Yeah, she's very strong, isn't she? And she is again Dorothy Sayers, as Dorothy Sayers would like to be. And I can't remember, I think it's in Strong Poison, where Peter Wimsey is talking about how she looks and what she wears, she should wear deep red, and she should wear these sort of heavy gold rings, and you know damn fine that that's what Dorothy Sayers wears, and she wants somebody who's going to admire her for herself, for her brain and for her slightly flamboyant and eccentric clothes,
and who doesn't mind her having a past.
He doesn't mind her having a past. No, and he says in that book, when he keeps proposing to Harriet Vane and she says, "But I've had a lover, I've had a lover. So I've had several. They don't complain." just very contemporary, very modern, to be written in the 30s, I think, was great stuff. Yeah.
Before I ask the audience what they want to know from you, let's talk a little bit about libraries. You're a very vocal champion of libraries, and I wouldn't be doing right by you to not let you
rant
a little bit about libraries.
Why do we need libraries? We need libraries at this particular time of fake news because we need somewhere where truth can be kept. I think that's so vitally important. We also need a place where people with very differing views can come together and share those views with civility and politeness and courtesy. And libraries do that through their reading groups. More importantly, I think, there is an economic argument for libraries.
Which is what?
Last time I looked at the DCMS's own website, the creative industries generate £8 million an hour for the UK. how are we going to have creative people if we don't allow them access to stories? For most people in the UK, their only access to the arts is the library. And we need to make that accessible for them. And my dream library would be somewhere like The Word in South Shields. It's a wonderful new library. Again, the council had the foresight not to put up shops in this bit of wasteland, but to build this amazing new library, which is called The Word. And in there, they have a community choir, they have kids doing drama, they have computer designy, technical stuff going on, and they have masses and masses of books. And I would see libraries more as a kind of place for apprenticeships for the creative arts. And to say that we can't afford libraries is to say we want a strong manufacturing base, but we can't teach kids maths and physics because it's too expensive. It's just bizarre. There are more people employed in the creative arts, and it makes more money than the whole of the agricultural sector, for instance. And to deny it that grassroots money that it needs, and the skilled staff, because volunteers can't run libraries, then we're just doing the whole economic community a disservice.
Well, what you said to me earlier, we were talking about the Bible, and you told me your favorite line.
In the beginning was the Word, yeah. And the Word is what helps us define who we